And we're going to talk to Bryan Kalbrosky from USA Today, talking a little NBA draft here on Ruscin Zach. Hey, Bryan, good afternoon.
How's it going?
Great. So we'll start around here, and we'll start with Moses Moody. Where is he going to go? It's a foregone conclusion he's leaving school after 1 year, I think.
Yeah, Moses Moody is has been on everyone's radar as a pro prospect for years now. He's somebody that I think most scouts and executives were fully familiar with before he even played a game at Arkansas. Realistically, his Montverde started five, could have competed with any of the teams in the country in college basketball this year. I think that he was a better teammate for Cade Cunningham and same with Daron Sharp than the guys that Cade actually played with at Oklahoma State. So I definitely feel that Moses Moody is a lottery pick at this point in his process. He's somebody who I think made a positive impact on both sides of the ball. And he's somebody who realistically, outside of the top few guys that, you kind of hear the most, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs, Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, is probably the next name. If it's not him, he's in that conversation alongside, his high school teammates, Scotty Barnes, Keon Johnson, Jalen Johnson, Jaden Springer. Those are probably the other names, Sharif Cooper as well, that really jump off the page as kind of the next guy. But, I think as early as 5 is kind of when his range really starts in terms of teams, giving him serious consideration.
I'm going to ask you a question. The day after Arkansas season ended, I'll ask you a question we asked our listeners. And in the NFL, when you've got a top 5, top 7 pick, you're expecting that guy to come in and play right away. The NBA draft's a little bit differently. They're looking 3 years down the line at what you're going to be. Is Moses Moody NBA ready today?
Oh, I don't know if he's NBA ready today, but I don't know if it matters. I think realistically, in a lot of ways, many of the guys that we see picked in the lottery, year after year, are not NBA ready. Was Kobe NBA ready when he was drafted? Not really. Obviously there are guys who are the exceptions to the rule. Luka Doncic was one of the most accomplished, prospects we'd ever seen, considering everything he had done at the, Euro level before he came over to the States. But, I think that his resume already for Moody, coming through the Team USA system, coming through the Montverde system, now coming through, what I believe to be a very impressive campaign for Arkansas. They had a top 10 defense in the country. They did play competitively and get some big wins along the way, throughout the season as well against, tough teams. And I think that he was, a high usage player during those games. So in terms of what he can do at the NBA level right now, probably not all that much. But I think even guys selected potentially ahead of him might even be more raw. I think Jonathan Kuminga is probably more raw than Moody in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to his shot selection and his actual 3-point shot as well. I think Evan Mobley, who I really believe is, a perfect big for the modern NBA, is going to take some serious time before he'll be able to have a real role at the NBA level, considering just his frame. He needs to add a decent amount of muscle mass before he'll be able to do anything, at all against someone like Joel Embiid or Anthony Davis. I think you saw a similar thing with Kevin Durant coming out of college, right? It takes some time for your body to develop. You're seeing it right now with even someone like James Wiseman, who's really, really struggling right now. But I don't think the Warriors regret taking him at number 2 overall, even though I don't know if he's ready to be an NBA player at this moment.
Talking with Bryan Kalbrosky from USA Today here on Ruscin Zach. So how, if at all, does a player doing well or a player kind of shrinking in the NCAA tournament, does that impact what these GMs and scouts are looking at in any way?
Maybe I think it's a case-by-case scenario, yes. I think in any way, yes. I don't know if I would say, across the board, it's a make-or-break time. I think a lot of times when you see, players who move up or down considerably during those moments, it's something that you might regret, being like, I shouldn't have moved him so high. I reacted too much to a small sample size. Max Amos from Oral Roberts, is still going to be a liability on defense, and is still going to be undersized, no matter what he's in the tournament. There's nothing he can do to change any of that. But, on the same token, I think it was really helpful to see kind of the clutch gene in someone like Jalen Suggs, who was able to really step up and, completely hit that shot in a way that he seemed poised and ready to do at his age. I think similarly you saw in the national championship that someone like Drew Timme can kind of get thrown around a little bit by a more physical team like Baylor. Those are the kind of tests that you have at the next level. I think, especially with a situation like Gonzaga, when they weren't going against necessarily, as tough of a competition during the regular season, you actually see what they would potentially do against a more NBA-style team, moving forward, which is how you kind of have to evaluate a prospect. So, I think that sometimes, playing under the big lights, tells you a little bit about someone's character. I certainly believe that to be true. I think that, you kind of see sometimes, that in Damian Lillard, where he doesn't shy away from the big moments. And those are things that I do think matter. Those are intangibles. Those are character traits that I do think matter. I personally have interviewed Moses Moody myself, and, just strictly off of, away from a basketball perspective, I found his intelligence and his maturity to be, top of the charts, really, in terms of just the way that he carried himself, his thoughtfulness, his demeanor. I mean, he was, a true pro at that sense, and he hadn't even played a game in Arkansas yet when I had spoken to him one-on-one last summer. Because I think he had committed to Arkansas, but he hadn't even gotten to campus yet. So I think that those are things that, are part of the equation. But obviously, Suggs developed some fans by hitting that huge shot. I think across the board, you see moments like that where a scout starts to really fall in love with a player based off of a moment he may have seen from that player during the tournament. But I don't think it's necessarily the end-all, be-all evaluation point.
I want to ask you about Davion Mitchell from Baylor. I mean, he's a guy that, was front and center, and it's an interesting case study because he's 23 years old. I saw a comparison to Fred VanVleet as kind of, the guy that developed a little bit later. The NBA drafts on potential. This guy's, you use Moses Moody as an example. He's 5 years older. Where does a guy like Davion Mitchell, who was clearly the best player on the floor last night, where does he fall into sort of not just the scouting, but the draft itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think realistically, he is somebody who I think could have a positive role in an NBA rotation. As soon as next season as well. And I think Fred VanVleet actually is a pretty good comparison. I'm not entirely sure I'm quite there with his jump shot being quite as just effective as Fred VanVleet's is, but I do think that ultimately it can potentially get there, especially, when working with an NBA shooting coach. So Davion Mitchell is somebody who, during the offseason, when I first started putting out my mock drafts and big boards for the 2021 class last year, I had somebody who I really trust reach out to me and be like, you need to include Davion Mitchell. Like I've seen him work out recently, and he looks just completely ready. Like he's got next. He's ready to take the next step and have an impact. And, I had interviewed Jared Butler and gotten a similar impression from Jared. So I think realistically, Davion's somebody that I would probably have in the top 20 right now because that's starting to be the area where typically playoff teams are starting to draft. If I were a team, like Orlando, I don't know if I'd have much of a use for someone like Davion Mitchell because, by the time that, he's going to be able to be at his most impactful, it's not necessarily going to be in line with whatever they're building there, or in Oklahoma City, for example. Teams that are fully rebuilding are looking for younger prospects, in the 18-year-old range. So that's sort of my thing. I think, there are plenty of teams though, like a Philadelphia or a Boston or, even a Toronto that, can definitely find a ton of value in someone like Davion Mitchell, in that 15 to 30 range, because as they compete for a spot in the playoffs next season, they're going to want someone like him who is now a proven winner who they can go to war with. So I think his long-term development definitely got some bright spots last night, added to his resume. But I think he's somebody who I definitely would want on my NBA team.
Jalen Suggs obviously had a great tournament. Gonzaga has a nice run, and I think the more exposure that we got to him, the more people sort of fell in love with him and started talking about him being one or two. But at the end of the day, I mean, Cade Cunningham is going to be the first name called.
I would have to assume so. That would at least be my pick. I can't speak for every general manager, so it does depend on the lottery, how that shakes out, who gets the one pick. But for me, it's Cade Cunningham all day. Just that blend of size, shooting, athleticism, playmaking, just that alpha mentality. I think that those are the kind of things you see in someone like Luka Doncic and LaMelo Ball. And those guys didn't go number one, but I think a lot of teams are regretting that. And I think that I'm not saying Cade is either of those guys, but in terms of guys that check all of those boxes, you pretty much only really see that in LaMelo Ball and Luka Doncic at this point. So, I think that for me, it would be Cade. I think Suggs is somebody who at 2 or 3 or even 4, far from a consolation prize. He's an amazing asset in his own right. But it's not quite the same kind of comp. I think with the comp you hear a little bit more often with Jalen Suggs is closer to like a Drew Holiday, who Drew Holiday just got huge back extension himself, but he's been an amazing pro and somebody who teams have loved to have his entire career. So there's nothing wrong with Drew Holiday upside, but it is not the same as like a Luka Doncic upside or LaMelo Ball upside.
All right, Bryan Kalbrosky, USA Today, covering the NBA and talking about the draft. Bryan, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to help.
All right, Bryan Kalbrosky with us here on Ruscin and Zach. All right.
There you go, NBA draft.